Good evening. Thanks for coming out tonight. We do have a full agenda, and we look forward to hearing every item as we move forward. So we will call the City of DuPont regular City Council meeting to order on November 10th at 7:05 p.m. We'll ask the clerk to please call roll.
Councilmember Coffey.
Here.
Councilmember Ehrenreich. Here. Councilmember Graham. Here. Councilmember Marin will be joining us later this evening. Councilmember Trotter. Here. Councilmember Westman. Here. Councilmember Wilcox. Here. Interim Police Chief Ron Goodpaster. Here. Assistant City Administrator, Finance Director Don Masco. Here. City Administrator Bill McDonald. Here. Fire Chief Greg Hull. Here. Public Works Director Peter Zahn. Here. Our attorney this evening, Steve Victor.
Here.
Citizens, today we mourn in more than one different area. And one is we honored 7 striker soldiers on Fort Lewis today. And it was Sergeant First Class Luis Gonzalez, Sergeant Fernando De La Rosa, Sergeant Dale Griffin, Sergeant Isaac Jackson, Sergeant Patrick Williamson, Specialist Zared Stanker, and Private First Class Christopher Walsh with their friends and families. And we also mourn today with the loss and the tragedy that happened at Fort Hood. And we also have the recognition of Veterans Day tomorrow. So we respectfully request, after the Pledge of Allegiance, that we allow a few moments of silence for these items. And please think about when we have these moments of silence that I know for me personally, as I sat and looked and held and hugged the family members on Fort Lewis, what went through my mind is just my heart and prayer went out to them, that they could be comforted, not only their friends and the family, but also their battle buddies that are downrange. So I ask you to please keep that in mind. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tonight we have a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He said, "All labor that uplifts humanity has dignity and importance and should be undertaken with painstaking excellence." This brings us to item number 4, which is the presentation by the Sequalitchew Creek Council. We would welcome Beth to come forward. Beth Elliott. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
And excellent. And we're going to put the presentation up on the screen so folks watching this from home can also see the same information.
Perfect. I wish I had some pictures up there too.
We'll have some later.
Okay.
All right.
Well, good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to come before the council to talk. A newly formed Facebook page called Save Sequalitchew Creek is strong, and it is growing. Its members are not just residents of DuPont, but also concerned citizens across our state and country. Sequalitchew Creek is a regional draw, a natural resource gem that we feel needs to be protected and preserved for future generations. Why is Sequalitchew Creek so important to the future of DuPont? It's important for its economic, historical, and environmental values. The economy is front and center on everyone's mind. We can understand why Glacier Portland is interested in the gravel. They stand to make millions in sales from this material. However, the city gets delayed development for 15 years of the area, delayed tax revenue for 15 years, and a 200-acre hole in the ground that will be difficult to attract industry or homeowners. We believe the economic impacts have not been fully evaluated or even explored. Perhaps our real economic future is in a responsible development of our historic district. This area is more important for its cultural significance. It was designated one of the 10 most endangered properties in Washington state. This was awarded in 1999 by the Washington Trust of Historic Preservation after the warehouse company blocked successful nomination as a historic district until all of their lands were sold. Historians say this area is the birthplace of Puget Sound for Western settlement and has even more ancient associations for the Native American tribes. It is one of the most important historic settlements in Washington state. Sequalitchew Creek in its entirety is the last remaining natural link to the history of Washington state. The Sequalitchew band of the Nisqually Indian tribe settled near the mouth of the creek. It was here that the first tribe first began trading with British-owned Hudson Bay Company. The Methodist mission site was built up along the south bluff of the Sequalitchew Canyon. It is this history alone that is the springboard for developing a national historic district right here in DuPont. The long-term economic benefits of such a district could be substantial for the city. Has anyone at City Hall done a cost-benefit analysis of bringing in a national historic district versus having a gravel pit that could fit all of downtown Tacoma inside of it? The development of a tourist destination historic district plus the beauty of an improved natural area is an economic opportunity many cities can only dream about, but DuPont can have it. Sequalitchew Creek is an outdoor laboratory for our residents and school children. Students from Chloe Clark Elementary study water samples taken from the creek every year as a part of their curriculum. The Children's Village Montessori students released baby salmon into the creek after the class studied and raised salmon eggs through a project from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And students from Pioneer Middle School will be exploring the creek this spring. Protecting our open spaces, wetlands, and natural resources is not only good for the environment, it's good for our health. DuPont has miles of trails that promote a healthy lifestyle. Northwest Landing was built on the premise of incorporating wetlands and open spaces to give residents room to stretch their legs and live a healthier lifestyle. This is why people chose to move here. The DuPont Municipal Code was designated to protect those wetlands. The city is a signatory of the 1994 Settlement Agreement. Part of that agreement includes the statement that Lone Star, now Glacier Cal Portland, agrees to seek no permits in the future to mine within the shoreline jurisdiction or within 100 feet of the top of the bank of Sequalitchew Creek, or in a manner that would significantly impact the flow of Sequalitchew Creek. You can find this language on page 22 of the 1994 Settlement Agreement. The city's comprehensive plan and development code were amended to reflect changes required by the settlement agreement. At the pre-application meetings for the proposed mine expansion, the city had the settlement agreement, the comprehensive plan, and the municipal code language to advise Glacier not to apply for an extension, but chose to ignore its own language, accept their application, and require only minimal permits. The Vashon Aquifer feeds all of the Sequalitchew Creek. If you drain out the aquifer, rechannel the water down to the lower level of the creek, you're killing the top half of the creek and altering the natural flow. That is a violation of the '94 agreement of which the city is a signatory. Edmonds Marsh, our most prized wetland, which is part of Sequalitchew Creek, will have its water table lowered. This is a violation of the DuPont Municipal Code. So why did the city choose to ignore the code that protects our most prized wetland, which is part of Sequalitchew Creek? There are many complex questions surrounding Glacier's proposed mine expansion that we fear have not been fully vetted. This includes the impact on the community's natural resources and land values. Does the proposed mine expansion comply with DuPont's land use code for what is slated to be built in Sequalitchew Village? Was city staff able to make sure Glacier followed their original reclamation requirements for their existing mine? With the staff shortages the city currently has in their community development department, will the city be able to keep up with such a large project that has so much at stake? It is a fact city staff made mistakes over the past 2 years with this land use application. That alone has eroded citizen trust. We can only encourage you, council, to open your eyes, do your research, and ask the pertinent questions so that you can be better informed in the decision-making process. The citizens of DuPont elected you to be good stewards of our city now and for generations of citizens to come. So please take a long walk through Edmonds Marsh and go down the canyon. And most of all, we ask that you do your homework before you sign the MOU. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Elliott. Council, is there any questions for Ms. Elliott at this time on this item? Seeing none, thank you very much for this presentation. We will have a discussion item under 9A for the Glacier Memorandum of Understanding, and we will have presentation by the signatories. Then under item number 14A, we actually will have action for the council to consider on this MOU. We will move next to item 5A. We'll ask the city clerk to please read item 5A into the record.
2010 proposed budget public hearing.
Ms. Masco is going to give us a brief presentation just to let you know how this is going to go tonight. Once we get the brief presentation, I will open it up for a public hearing for anybody in the public wishing to comment on what is presented here tonight by our finance director. And then once comments are completed on this item, I will close public comment, and then we will do the same process on item 5B. So with that, Ms. Masco.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. This is the 2010 public hearing on the preliminary budget, which has been presented. These first few slides we can go through rather quickly. Sorry, there we go. There's the DuPont vision statement, and we always start the budget process by a review of what our vision statement and our mission statement are. DuPont is a vital city known for its plan setting and hometown sense of community. The city successfully blends natural beauty and a rich Northwest history. And our mission statement is to provide the citizens of the city of DuPont a beautiful natural environment, high-quality government services, progressive leadership, and community inclusion. The 2010 budget totals over $10 million in all funds. Of that total, $6 million is for the general fund. This is a 6.1% decrease from the 2009 budget and a 10.5% decrease from 2008 actual expenditures. Obviously, you are well aware that we are in the middle of an economic recession of a magnitude not seen since the Great Depression. People and businesses are struggling, and many of the things that improve the quality of life for our residents are in jeopardy. For a number of years, local government has been headed for a financial crisis brought on by a structural flaw in our source of funding. Property tax growth is capped by state law at 1% growth per year, and yet the cost of doing business in normal economic times increases annually at a rate closer to 4%. For a number of years, DuPont and most other cities in this state have been living on revenue from a booming economy and an extensive development. Sales tax revenues and other one-time money has allowed us to keep up with the rising costs of providing public safety, parks, roads, and other services, but obviously we are still continue to be faced with significant budget challenges in 2010. Of the total city operating expenditures, 40% is devoted to public safety. Another 20% goes towards providing water and stormwater services. Oops. Next. Sorry. Uh-oh. Technical
Just a moment while we
difficulties.
have some technical difficulties that we're working through.
Oh.
We have new technology blended with an old laptop.
Oh, here. Oh,
There
there we go. Okay. The city's general fund provides funding for basic services and is mostly funded by taxes, including property taxes, sales tax, and utility taxes. Fees for some services like building permits and other development-related activity also contribute to the general fund, and some of the operations funded from the general fund include police, fire, emergency services, parks, greenways, recreation, and community development services. The amount of population growth over the last 10 years has been staggering and has presented challenges to the city of how to provide sustainable services within constricted revenues. Here's a chart that shows our top 10 general fund revenues, and as you can see, property taxes comprise a significant portion of the general fund's revenues. We will discuss this funding source in a little more detail during our revenue hearing. Taxes make up 72% of the general fund budget, with the bulk of the rest of the funding sources being development-related. These development-related revenues have dropped dramatically over the last year, dropping almost 30% from 2008 actual collections. And coming up next, hopefully, we'll see a slide that shows a breakdown of our general fund taxes. Maybe.
Ms. Masco, maybe you could talk to that slide while we're waiting for it to come up.
It just gives us the breakdown of that the property and EMS taxes make up 44% of our general fund taxes. Sales taxes amount to 20% of our general fund taxes. Business and excise taxes are 5.4%, and utility taxes are 27.5%. So we're obviously going to continue to have problems with this. So I'll just kind of talk quickly to what the slides would be saying if they were up on the screen. General fund expenditure projections this year, again, are about $6 million for 2010. Of that, again, public safety, police and fire are the bulk of those expenditures. The majority of the expenditures in the general fund, 54.5% actually, are dedicated to public safety, which includes police, fire, and emergency services. Other services, including maintenance on infrastructure, parks, recreation, planning, and building services account for almost 29%, while other services such as court, jail, and animal control contracts, administration, finance, and other support services make up the rest. Oops. Now the slides are coming. Okay. The strategy of being reliant on growth and economic development as a way to balance the city's budget has been significantly impacted by the national recession, leaving a major challenge in balancing anticipated expenditures against projected revenues. In 2009, general fund revenues are projected to be almost $1 million below budget. The city has responded by making significant budget cuts of almost $600,000 to rebalance our budget. The result is a projected ending fund balance for 2009 at about the same level as we ended 2008. However, the current projections reflect a decrease in ending fund balance by the end of 2010. These next few slides show the non-general fund revenue projections. This is where your real estate excise tax, lodging tax, your utility charges, the LID fund, and a couple other miscellaneous items, and that's $3.5 million of the 2010 budget. Street operations make up about $364,000 of our non-general fund. Utilities make up $1.5 million. Debt service is $1.3 million. Capital outlay is just under $600,000. Interfund transfers of $314,000, and some one-time expenditures, which would be like in your hotel motel tax expenditures and technology funds of $77,000. This shows what, at this point, the ending 2010 ending fund balances are projected to be. All told, across the board, we should end 2010 with approximately $7.2 million in ending fund balance reserves. This is a list of the proposed capital outlay that's included in the 2010 budget. There is no capital outlay in the general fund. The majority of the proposed capital outlay purchases for 2010 will be funded from equipment replacement dollars which reside in that fund and a few other items in the utility funds.
At this time, we'll open up public comment for the 2010 proposed budget. The public comment period will begin at 7:24 p.m. At this time, we'd ask anybody wishing to comment on the 2010 budget, please come forward. Anybody? Going once, going twice. Hear the crickets tick. All right. The budget hearing is now closed at approximately 7:25 p.m. Item number 5B is on the 2010 revenues. We'll ask Ms. Masco to give a brief presentation. It looks like you will be doing a verbal presentation as they're getting the presentation up and running.
And that's unfortunate because this is the one where the charts really help tell the story. The assessed valuation for 2010 is $1.28 billion for the city of DuPont. And what that translates into is a approximate levy rate of, oh, there we go, of $1.02 for 2010, yielding a property tax levy proceeds of $1.3 million. While our assessed valuation did continue to grow between 2009 and 2010, the pace was slower this year than it has been in the past several years, as you can see back the difference between 2006 and 2007. 2007 and 2008, etc. You can pull it in. This just graphically depicts what the city's assessed valuation has done from 2000 until 2010 and the amount of growth in the last 10 years. The city's new construction value placed on the tax rolls in the past year was almost $39 million. This will result in an additional $38,000 in regular property taxes in 2010. This is, I refer to as my Councilmember Ehrenreich slide. This is how property tax is calculated in Washington State. And it walks through the formula. This is, take your prior year's levy of $1.26 million, you times it by the 1% statutory limit, and that brings $12,679 additional dollars between 2009 and 2010 for property tax revenues. Next, you add in the new construction assessed valuation, which is also multiplied by the 2009 property tax rate. We spoke about this on the previous slide, and that brings in an additional $38,828. Administrative refunds are just some housekeeping items from last year, an additional $285, bringing our total levy amount to $1,319,700. You take your total levy, you divide that by your total assessed valuation, multiply that by $1,000 for per assessed valuation, and you come up to $1.02 just for your 2010 property tax. No. Okay, well, here we go. This slide shows in 2009, the city of DuPont was tied with Lakewood for the 4th lowest property tax in Pierce County. Keep in mind that the city of Lakewood does not provide fire services, nor did the 3 lowest property tax cities of Sumner, Gig Harbor, or Edgewood. If you redo this slide, this is the previous slide, but it also now adds in general city services and fire levies. This slide is vastly different for the other cities we discussed in the previous slide who had the lowest property tax rates in the county, and this now shows the city of DuPont in 2009 with the lowest property tax levy in comparison with those cities who also provide fire service via the city or via a fire district. Our state's complex property tax system often leaves the public with a false assumption that more of their property taxes are going directly to their city. However, of the total amount paid for property tax, less than 10% goes to support all of the city services received by our citizens. For every $1 paid in property tax, almost half goes to your local school district, with the remainder going to Pierce County, the state of Washington, the Port of Tacoma, and Pierce County Library. In other words, the city gets 14 cents out of every dollar, and the other 86 cents goes somewhere else. Again, as we discussed, the regular ad valorem or regular general property tax levy for 2010 would be just under $1.03 per 1,000 assessed valuation, and the EMS property tax levy would be 43 cents per 1,000 assessed valuation. For EMS, that would levy $553,192, and for general property tax, $1,319,700. This is the annual property tax comparison between what an average homeowner of a house assessed at $300,000 is currently paying in 2009. And I'm sorry, I apologize, that second column should read 2010, not 2009 again. So you can see that in 2009, for a $300,000 assessed home, you would be paying $433 for the year. For 2010, it would be $437 per year. And so with that, it's the end of the presentation on revenues.
Yes, Councilmember Ehrenreich has a question before we open up the public hearing. That's perfectly fine.
Could you comment briefly on the excess levy or the vote? So what's that?
Could you use the microphone, please?
Just one moment. Time out. We'll ask the city clerk to please turn up the volume on Councilmember Ehrenreich's mic, please.
Can you hear me in the back? Thumbs up? Okay, great. Thank you. Could you explain briefly the voted levy and the excess levy that's gone away, it's paid off? Is that correct?
That is true. The last payment on that debt service was made in 2009, and so there is no excess property tax levy for 2010.
And that went to the refurbishing of the old city hall, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
The public hearing for the 2010 revenues is open at 7:31 p.m. Is there anybody in the public wishing to comment on the revenues? Okay, we will close the public hearing at 7:31 p.m. Council, item number 6 is approval of the agenda. We are going to add 14B, B as in boy, and it's going to be the tracking report. Council, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Yeah, I'd like to approve the agenda as read. Second.
Motion made by Councilmember Coffey and seconded by Councilmember Wilcox. Council, any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Please let the record show the agenda passes 7-0. This brings us to item number 7, which is our first public comment opportunity. This will be our first of the second. This will be our first of the second public opportunity to comment tonight. I'm going to ask that when you do come forward to talk about your comments tonight, that if there is a group, a representative for many having the same message, we ask that you send up a group representative. And if there is a representative, we will give them more minutes than just the 3-minute time limit. So is there anybody in the public wishing to comment on any item on or off the agenda? Any item on or off the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we will go to item number 8. We'll ask the city clerk to please read item number 8 in its entirety.
Approval of the consent agenda items, council special meeting minutes for October 20th, 2009, council regular meeting minutes, October 27th, 2009, claim vouchers list, November 10th, 2009.
Council, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda items as written? Motion is made by Councilmember Trotter. I'm going to ask whoever makes the second, not only push your button, but also make a verbal second.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Marin. Any council discussion on the consent agenda items? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Please let the record show this item passes 7-0. Brings us to item number 9A. We'll ask the clerk to please read it into the record and ask Mr. McDonald to please be prepared to give a presentation, and also ask our city attorney to frame the discussion.
Glacier Memorandum of Understanding, Bill McDonald.
Mayor and Council, the Memorandum of Understanding is a document that was produced as a part of a mediation process invoked under the 1994 settlement agreement. We have 3 of the signatories of that agreement that are here that would like to speak about the MOU. But before that, I would like to give our city attorney an opportunity to frame both what the 1994 settlement agreement is and how the MOU flows from that settlement agreement. Then we have representatives from the Nisqually Delta Association, Department of Ecology, and Glacier that would like to speak on behalf of the MOU. With that, I'll turn it over to Steve Victor, our city attorney.
Mr. Victor.
Mayor and members of the council, before I frame what the issue before you is, I want to be very clear about what it is not. The issue before the council tonight is not approving or advancing the Glacier application in any way. You will not, by taking any action tonight on the item before you in your agenda, you will not be making any conclusive decisions on the permit application. You will not be approving it. You will not be advancing it. There are substantial analysis and process and likely arguments to be had in the course of that application that will go on for a very long time. So to the extent there is any concern that there is an action tonight on the application, I want to be clear that is not the case. What is before you is the result of the invocation of the dispute resolution clause of the 1994 settlement agreement. That agreement was the result of disputes over a prior development, and among all the interested parties, a resolution that they felt would allow that prior project to go forward, but secure and protect the resources for the future. The recent application by Glacier has created a real and substantial dispute as to whether the application is in fact allowed under the 1994 settlement agreement. As a consequence of that dispute, the dispute resolution clause of the 94 settlement agreement was invoked, and mediation was held according to the terms of the settlement agreement. As a result of that mediation, all of the parties to the agreement participated, and so far all the parties to the agreement except the city have agreed to this memorandum of understanding. And what the memorandum of understanding does is it creates a halt in the application process. The permit application would stop, and all of the parties to the original settlement agreement would agree to sit down and analyze the issues and determine whether there is some action that can be taken that would honor the intent of the 94 agreement and allow perhaps an improvement in the creek, perhaps a development, or if they can't agree to that. It's a process outside the normal application process. And what the parties would be doing is simply stopping the application, also stopping any potential litigation, any potential appeals, but not giving those up. No party will be advantaged or disadvantaged by going through the process that's contemplated in the MOU. It's an opportunity to see if there is some other way to resolve some of the issues or all of the issues. If that can't occur, everyone is back in exactly the position they would be before the MOU. Everyone has their arguments, everyone has their appeal rights, everyone has their litigation rights. So it's neutral as to its impact on any of the parties. And it simply does create this hiatus where the parties can attempt to negotiate and analyze and arrive at something or not. in which case the processes under the 94 agreement, this dispute resolution process under the 94 agreement will be complete, and they're free to pursue both the application and opposition to the application.
Council, any questions before we continue forward with the presentations by the signatories? Seeing done. Mr. McDonald? Hold on. Councilmember Aaron Wright.
You've told us what the MOU is not, and you've told us what it does. What are the consequences if the MOU does not go forward? It's not signed?
If the MOU is not executed by all parties, then there could be additional mediation among the parties, but more likely they'll simply proceed through the ordinary process, which means the permit application would be processed, the analysis will occur, parties may exercise their rights to litigate this, to appeal the issues as they would in the ordinary course. And so this, in effect, the process goes forward as it would without this opportunity. And
the opportunity to sit down and discuss.
And analyze and attempt to reach maybe a more creative solution than they would, or a creative approach than you would in an adversarial proceeding.
Thank you.
But they may not.
Councilmember Graham.
Thank you. Understanding that we'll hear from 3 of the members that are actually signatories to this agreement, from my conversations with representatives of all the parties involved, I understand that everyone has agreed that they will sign this new MOU, but I was not, nor any of the council members, in the negotiations. Can you confirm that all the negotiating parties plan on signing this MOU?
All of the parties to the original settlement agreement, other than the city, have agreed to execute the MOU, and will address you tonight, I believe.
Council, any other questions before we go into the presentations? Seeing none, Mr. McDonald?
We'll just take them in the order I have them here. Tom Skirvold, representing the Nisqually Delta Association.
Welcome, Mr. Stovall. Do we have a presentation to project on the screen?
No, I don't have a presentation.
Okay, I think we have this beautiful item here.
Let me, it's not a problem for you. I'll hand you a copy of my presentation.
I believe we received this also by email. Council, does everybody have a copy?
Oh, well, everyone's got a copy. I don't probably hand one out, but I got pretty color pictures.
Excellent.
It's your town, so.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe slightly.
Colorism. So. Pictures are worth 1,000 words, right?
I want to thank you for inviting me to speak this evening. I've been a part of Nisqually Delta Association for a very long time, and Nisqually Delta Association has been around and sort of involved, very much involved, in the city of DuPont for the better part of the last 40 years, really. For the last 40 years, Nisqually Delta Association, it started in 1970, and has been very much involved in shorelines issues in the city of DuPont. And I myself was a part of the settlement negotiations that came around in '94, and have been very much involved in the MOU negotiations. My organization called for the mediation as a first step in trying to resolve a dispute that we felt was based in a strong legal position we had. And so tonight I'd like to answer 3 questions that I was given to consider and answer to the council on. Those questions I believe were in my original handout. What was the purpose of the '94 settlement agreement? What has happened since '94 to bring us to this MOU today? And what can the city of DuPont expect from the Nisqually Delta Association as we move through this process? 40 years ago, Nisqually Delta Association was founded, it'll be 40 years ago this May, actually, to in part support the development of a Shorelines Management Act. And it was a group of citizens from both Thurston and Pierce County who were involved and interested in protecting the Nisqually Delta as a national wildlife refuge. When the, oops, use my double-sided, excuse me. Once we got the Shorelines Management Act passed in 1971, got involved in helping found the National Wildlife Refuge, appointed to it. I would review for the council the Shorelines Management Act of 1971 names 5 shorelines of statewide significance. One of those shorelines, not by a small coincidence, is the Nisqually Reach, from a place in Thurston County called the Wolf Bight, up across the plain of the Nisqually River, and up all the way to Tatsolo Point in Pierce County, or really the northern tip today of your fair city. In the 1970s, Weyerhaeuser Corporation acquired a large piece of property within the present day's DuPont city limits. At that time, it wasn't in the city limits, and declared a vision to establish a new world-class, vertically integrated forest products system, complete with an international, multi-dimensional shipping facility. And that dock was to be placed, excuse me, at the mouth of Sequalitchew Creek. And the idea was to run the highway down Sequalitchew Creek to the new superport. And the Nisqually Delta Association, on the strength of the Shorelines Management Act and concerns about the SEPA process, filed legal action in that matter, and ended up through a process of regular court proceedings before the Supreme Court in the state after 10 years. And the state Supreme Court heard the issue a couple times. Second go around, decided on a solution that really, in a lot of ways, both sides claimed victory. The Nisqually Delta decision saw the solution that the courts had put forward was to say that the dock, which was very, very large, very extensive, but had very little on it, and was slated to only be used for the export of forest products, nothing else, and the only upland use was to be a paved area of about 100 acres on which logs would be staged. The only use for the dock for then and for in the future was to export logs. And the court, from the project proponents' perspective, decided in their favor and said they could get the permits for the dock and begin construction immediately. The permits were pulled. 5 years later, the permits lapsed. The company citing change in the timber market. From my perspective, it was that they couldn't really make the economics work if they were going to be restricted to the use that they had declared in their EIS. That was back 20 years ago now. And for a while, it sort of, the matter sort of sat dormant. And the company started to shop around for other uses for the shoreline and quickly came upon a plan to export gravel with a dock. A proposal was put forward. My organization again objected. And in this case, under the terms of the Shorelines Management Act, we went before the Shorelines Hearings Board and there stated our case, our objection to a dock development. And the Shorelines Hearings Board, after hearing all sides, remanded the parties to mediation. The Nisqually Delta Association then invested a considerable amount of time and treasure in a year-long negotiation to come to the settlement agreement of 1994. I think that's the first question I was asked to answer. Where did the settlement agreement, what is that settlement agreement back in 94? That agreement settled a 20-year court dispute and brought us to a point where we had declared that there would be a gravel mine, the dock would be right-sized for the use, considerably larger than the one previously projected, and the location would be moved up to Tatsolo Point, coincidentally the end of the shoreline of statewide significance. Restrictions were put on the use of the development to protect the scenic vistas of the Nisqually Reach, and we were given provisions that essentially extended the shorelines management protections to the Sequalitchew Creek and the banks of the waters that are in DuPont. So in 1994, we kind of figured we had this thing won and decided this plan was going to keep us out of court for the next 100 years was the way it kind of read. If you casually read the agreement, you'll see there's some lofty language about 99 years worth of no asphalt plant. It's one of the things that comes forward. And so we went about our business of being reasonably minded civil parties and interested in the development of this area. The Nisqually Delta Association in 1985, I think, when was it? 95? 90, no, 90, got involved in a public participation grant to clean up help provide cleanup effort in the remediation of the DuPont site. The DuPont Powder Works site, by virtue of the Motka cleanup, gets money to have public participation involved. And we came to meetings, helped talk about what the cleanup looked like, what things needed to be done, and laid out some, I think, some very helpful information to the community that helped the community make some very good policy decisions about that cleanup that in part allowed the Creek Canyon to be retained through this all. And in that process, I personally went through about 5 grants, I think, in the series and spent 10 years on the matter. We ended up, at the end of all that, with coming into the closing part of it, a cleanup action plan. The cleanup action plan, as that was sort of being drawn out, a group of citizens came forward and said, boy, if the way you're going to do this, you're going to bulldoze off all that site, you're going to obliterate a whole bunch of historic sites. And that's going to be a damaging thing. And I frankly was so lost in the technical details that I was a little annoyed at the suggestion. I'm not near so annoyed, it turns out, as the folks from the other parties at the table. I managed to get everybody to talk about it by, in part, doing some petitioning, and we got it back into the discussion, and we eventually helped negotiate an agreement back in 2000 to allow the establishment of a national historic district within your fair community. Are you all aware of the historic district nomination? Very good. And I would hope then that you're also aware of another 2006 agreement about an option for historic sites. There are a couple acres of potential historic sites that, according to the last version of the agreement I've seen in 2006, times out at the end of this calendar year. And if the option isn't exercised, the community will in fact lose the opportunity to capture those pieces of property, which I think could be very, very important to the long-term economic viability of a national historic district. So, and I would guess too that you were also aware of the nomination for a national historic district. You've seen the basic text of that. I've got another link to that too, if you would like to know more about that. So I would say that my organization, and personally, I was engaged in the community up through very recent years. In 2007, we got word that there was a new proposal for a dock. A mine expansion. And the mine expansion included a new ditch line going into the main stem of the creek and was going to run the groundwater out of the system to make it work. And turns out I hadn't even gotten notice that there was going to be an EIS out on the streets. I just caught it at the very end and raised some hell at the city, and you guys extended the comment period, and I got a couple other people to comment. And after that week of reading and writing got done, went and found the 94 agreement. So that was pretty helpful, and because I saw that we really had a lot more legal rights in the issue than I had realized even while I was writing my comment letters on the EIS. And so I brought that to the city. I tried to bring that to the city. I tried to talk to the city about it. And got the idea that maybe we had something to talk about, and the city really wasn't very much involved in this. And then learned that the city was granting permits for a new confluence on the creek, and in fact the process was moving along. And so it was my group that got going and said, mediation. We're going to mediation because the settlement agreement says that's how we have to go to court. We got to go through this process. Excuse me. So that's how we got here. That's how I got here. What can the City of DuPont expect from the Sequalitchew Delta Association today and in the future? Oh, that would be delightful. Thanks. Excuse me a minute.
I'm going to ask the city clerk to please, excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm going to ask the city clerk to please scroll us down at the bottom of the picture where we are in the presentation, where we're at the 2009 MOU. Thank you.
Thanks. I would start by saying that we do feel we have a clear interest in retaining the values of the 94 settlement agreement. We think we won some important points in that discussion. I have a personal interest in recognizing a National Historic District. And I'm happy to hear that the council is aware of that, and I'm looking forward to hearing what's being done to successfully exercise the option agreement, because I think that's just absolutely important to making any kind of success of the venture. I would like to see a National Historic District nomination go forward to the keeper of the list. I think that the Historic District could potentially be an economic engine for the city well into the 21st century. You can rely on the Sequalitchew Delta Association to always work toward solutions that are to the benefit of all of the citizens of Washington State. We definitely, clearly want to see Sequalitchew Creek and its canyon treasured as a natural preserve, the watershed restored to support salmon, and the corridor to become the backbone of a park system that becomes a regional destination. We are intent that there be changes in the comprehensive plan to bring it back into alignment with the 1994 settlement agreement. I have spoken before to the city about the fact that the comprehensive plan has been redeveloped to suggest that one of the ways to make the bottom of the bucket work, when you get down to digging out the mine and you got a big hole that's like over a square mile, and you're going to build houses in the bottom of it. Apparently the comprehensive plan has now got an idea to get rid of the pesky bluffs because they block the view. The pesky bluffs are sort of called out in the Shorelines Management Act, and we intend to protect them. So just a point. The city is at a great moment of promise. The decisions made today will shape this community for many generations to come. As I see it, this council is at the razor's edge. Slide gracefully one way, and the legacy is heroic. People will long remember the wisdom and daring of those who are able to provide vision and direction. Fall the other way, the story's all goat. Please, join the MOU when you're ready to join the process. Understand where you are in this history. Study the history of this place. Calculate the trajectories of your actions. Please, enter a full and open partnership with your local constituents. Talk to the people who call this place home. Please take the time you need to formulate a plan that your grandchildren's grandchildren will remember with pride. I believe you are at a rare moment in time when you can and will make a mark on the history of this community and this state, and it will potentially be recognized and applauded for decades to come.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Skierfeld. I'm going to ask the council, is there any questions or comments before we move on to the next presentation? Councilmember Ehrenreich.
I appreciate your presentation, and I appreciate your long interest in the city and its whereabouts and its environs. But could you tell me a little bit more about the Nisqually Delta Station? What's your size of your membership? You've been around since 1970. Could you tell us a little more about yourselves, or?
Our organization is really representing, at its height was about 1,300 members, I believe. We basically felt that we had spent 20 years in court, and then we got into this mumbo-jumbo of a negotiated settlement and spent a year and a lot of money getting to something that worked out really for the benefit of the city in large part. And at the end of the deal, we kind of thought we had won the battle and we were kind of done. And I kind of stayed around and tidy up a couple other things. Okay. And the organization was saving Nisqually for a long time, got a lot of interest, was working very well. After we got to the settlement agreement, we pretty much were tired. A lot of us were heading that way. So as it is, we've been kind of sitting on the sidelines. I would point out that we signed the agreement and we pulled together in this coalition the Washington Environmental Council, People for Puget Sound, Seattle Audubon, National Audubon, most importantly, I think from our local constituency, Black Hills Audubon, Tahoma Audubon, Friends of Anderson Island. Did I mention People for Puget Sound? We have a long history of involvement and engagement with other interest groups. Okay. And my point would be that I feel well connected as an organization, even though right now we are a small brain trust.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Coffey.
Thank you for coming before us. It was nice to have a refresher course in this history. On your sheet, under the 1994 agreement, you have a quote here, and I believe this is from the 1994 agreement. And you are saying that they would seek no future permits to mine within 200 feet of the shoreline or in a manner that would significantly impact the flow of Sequalitchew Creek. Do you know, I have the 1994 settlement agreement here. Do you know what page that was on or where that quote is?
I'm afraid I don't have the page in front of me. I've got the quote. That was about as, I can tell you where to find the agreement. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, on page 22, where it talks about Sequalitchew Creek, in here it says, or within 100 feet of the top of the bank of Sequalitchew Creek. Now, is that something different than what you're saying here, within 200 feet of the shoreline?
There are multiple, I think that's a misquote potentially at that point, but there's, if you have to look in the agreement, there's detail, a drawing of a profile that gives some dimension to it. There's a couple different clauses that talk about the setbacks along the creek.
Okay, Mr. I just wondered, because, you know, in your paper that you handed out to us, you said 200 feet of the shoreline, but in here where I looked, it says within 100 feet of the top of the bank. But
the principle operating here is the Shorelines Management Act, which carries a 200-foot shore zone, which is certainly applicable to all the marine shores of the city.
Okay, Mr. McDonald, did you have a? I'm sorry. Did you have a comment?
Bottom of page 21.
On the bait? Oh, okay.
Councilmember Coffey, did you have a follow-up question?
No, thank you. Thank you.
Councilmember Westman.
Yes. On your proposal, under the second page, Aaron, can you flip that on up, please? where you have the 2009